I'm so upset. Oh my God.
God bless the United States.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Wild ride as always today. Usual devastating foreign policy news, but later in the program, gay sex is broken out in the Senate. Well, it's that literal story. We're gonna cover it. And then speaking of gay sex, Moms for Liberty, one of their founders, in an interesting LGBTQ situation. Interesting. So wild sex later in the program, but for now, unfortunately, we start with the important news, which is tragic in nature.
So let's begin with some of the latest reporting regarding the murders that have been taking place in the Gaza Strip at the hands of the IDF. Apparently, all of a sudden, they care about some of the people who have been killed, mainly because of their identity. Let's get to it.
The 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza made white flags to warn their own army not to shoot, smearing SOS in old food and writing in Hebrew, "Help 3 hostages." The Israeli military released the images overnight, saying the hostages were nonetheless mistakenly shot by Israeli troops.
If you weren't already under the assumption that the IDF is acting erratically, irrationally, and is completely out of control, I think the latest story involving 3 Israeli hostages being gunned down and killed by the IDF should maybe change your mind. Maybe. Now, the IDF has finally fessed up to accidentally killing 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza, but could this accident have been avoided? Let's watch.
Israel's chief of staff told soldiers the friendly fire could have been avoided, saying the hostages took off their shirts so that no one would think they have an explosive device and held a white cloth on a pole to identify themselves. They came speaking Hebrew, calling for help, he said, telling the troops never to shoot anyone with their hands up.
Now, just to give you some more information on the hostages, according to the Washington Post, the hostages, all of whom were civilians, probably had either escaped or were abandoned by their captors before they tried to make their way toward an Israel Defense Forces position in the Gaza City neighborhood of Sejaya on Friday, according to the official who spoke on the condition of anonymity in line with the rules of the briefing. They emerged tens of meters from the Israeli troops, from where the Israeli troops were stationed, he said. They were all without shirts and they have a stick with a white cloth on it, the official explained, adding that a soldier felt threatened and opened fire. Now, the IDF has identified the 3 hostages that they have slaughtered as Yotam Haim and Alon Shamris of kibbutz Kfar Aza and Samer al-Talalaka of kibbutz Nir Am. Now, 2 of the hostages were killed immediately when the soldier opened fire Friday, the military official said, while 1 was injured and ran inside a building. As soldiers entered it, a cry for help was heard in Hebrew, and the battalion commander issued an order to cease fire, the official said. But there was another burst of fire and the 3rd hostage was killed. So we've been hearing from Hamas, which you should not take at face value, that the aerial bombardments that the IDF has been conducting in the Gaza Strip has killed other hostages. And when you consider just the out of control nature of the IDF, it isn't that hard to believe. Obviously, we don't have evidence of what Hamas is saying, which is why you should take it at face value. But keep in mind, we're now talking about 3 hostages, Israeli hostages, that the IDF has fessed up to killing, slaughtering, even though they were holding white flags, even though they were not wearing shirts. You can't argue that they might be suicide bombers. They're not wearing shirts. Anyway, Cenk.
Yeah. So Israel kills civilians at a much greater rate than Hamas does. And I'm gonna give you the numbers in a second. But they say, no, it's okay. They're no good terrorists, but we are heavenly, wonderful democracy. Why? Because they say they intend to kill civilians. We do not intend to kill civilians. We just are the worst military in the world. We just accidentally killed 20 times the number of civilians that Hamas, a terrorist group trying to kill civilians, kills. But it's always an accident. Well, okay, now these three folks that were hostages, what could they have done to have not gotten killed? Because their shirts were off, so obviously, again, as Anna said, no suicide bombing. They're speaking Hebrew, they have a white flag, SOS. But imagine how many Palestinians they killed that did not get any kind of attention like this, because they're apparently mowing down everyone. By the way, other former IDF soldiers have formed a group called Breaking the Silence, where they explain, once they drop leaflets, they consider everyone in that area a fire-free zone, meaning fire at will. Okay, so there's not the whole world is talking about it because it's 3 Israeli hostages, but that happens to Palestinians every single day. And no one ever asks a question, are they Hamas, not Hamas?
Well, you're an anti-Semite if you ask that question, Cenk. How dare you? Yeah. How dare you ask that question? How dare you give a damn about the children who are being slaughtered at the hands of the IDF with the bombs that we supply them? Because if you do care about that, you're obviously anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic to give a damn about innocent civilians who literally have nowhere to go, nowhere to escape to flee for safety. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
but
okay. I'm sick of the same conversation over and over again.
100%. In fact, that's what one of the things I was gonna get to. So I've been having a lot of debates about Israel all over media recently, but I'm tired of the debates because it's like debating with folks who are just in a completely different reality. So Hamas killed 36 kids when they attacked Israel, and we condemn that, and that's terrible and awful. And people are, Jen Psaki's crying about Israeli kids just over the weekend, and that makes sense. And I feel terrible for those kids. 36 kids. Now Israel has killed 9,000 Palestinian kids. So who's the terrorist? So if you're saying, oh no, Israel just happens to kill everyone in their path, but it's all an accident, you might not realize it, but you sound ridiculous. No one outside of the hardcore Israeli or right-wing position believes that. We all think you sound insane. No, you're obviously trying to kill the civilians.
45% of the bombs that the IDF is using in the Gaza Strip, a densely populated strip of land, consist of what's referred to as dumb bombs, unguided munitions, meaning that they're not precise, they're not accurate. Using them in an area that is not as densely populated as Gaza is dangerous because you're going to very likely kill all sorts of innocent civilians who are nearby. In the case of Gaza, which is even more densely populated, it's an even bigger issue. It means more civilians are gonna die. And you know what's so interesting about this? The United States government reads this report about 45% of the bombs being used by the IDF being dumb bombs, and they're like, we don't get it. Why are they using these dumb bombs? We're supplying them with precision guided munitions. Really, you're gonna pretend like you don't know why they're using dumb bombs, even though they have other bombs that they can use that are a little more direct, a little more precise? Are we gonna keep having and rehashing the same conversation over and over again? Let's just keep it real. According to the United States government and its unwavering, undying devotion to Israel, the lives of those Palestinian kids just don't matter.
That's a fact.
It is. Actions speak louder than words.
If you say 36 kids dying breaks your heart, but 9,000 kids dying doesn't, and then you give a green light and want to send them $14 billion extra to murder more Palestinian kids, you are by definition saying, I don't care about those kids. 9,000 Palestinian children murdered, who cares? I don't care. All we need is plausible deniability. Oh, we didn't mean to kill 9,000 children. Okay, more facts. We drop 2,000-pound bomb, or Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs. That's 4 times bigger than any bomb that America dropped in Iraq in a residential area. We thought anything beyond 500 pounds is a war crime. They're at 2,000 pounds. Half their bombs are unguided, meaning, who cares, just drop it. And then now you see with the hostage situation, shoot at will, don't ask any questions, just kill them all. And then pretend that it's not our policy. Oh my God, every soldier there accidentally had the wrong policy. Every bomb accidentally fell on civilians. So I'll give you one last fact. So Hamas killed 846 civilians on October 7th. Outrage, terrible, horrific. Now, even if you believe IDF's numbers, which are comically false and total propaganda, but let's give them the benefit of the complete benefit of the doubt. 5,000 they say were Hamas fighters. Absurd. They've never shown any evidence of it. Okay, 19,000 killed overall. So 14,000 civilians at a minimum killed in Gaza. So that's 16 times the number of civilians killed by Israel over Hamas. So that makes Israel 16 times as guilty. All of those bombs and all of those bullets are acts of terrorism. And you could pretend all you like, no, Palestinian lives don't matter, none of them are civilians, we should just kill them all, murder them all, but I'm the good guy. Well, okay, but no one believes you. And we all have eyes, guys. Everyone in the world is watching what's happening in Gaza. People, families being removed limb by limb from the rubble. Over 90% of Gazans are now homeless because they've turned Gaza into the biggest war zone that anyone has ever seen, and that is what every human rights group is saying now. The worst war zone we have ever seen. They're butchering the civilians and pretending to be the good guys. The only people who believe any of that crap is people who listen to Israeli propaganda.
Now, how do Israelis feel about the fact that their military decided to gun down 3 of the hostages that they're purportedly trying to save in the Gaza Strip? Well, why don't we hear from them? I don't want to put words in their mouths. Let's watch.
The families of hostages still in Gaza are outraged, calling daily for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to resume negotiations with Hamas and bring their loved ones home.
I am angry that the government let this situation get so far. I am angry at the world that is not supporting a deal right now, because this is the only way to bring them back home. And I am angry right now, I'm angry at all.
Opinion polls suggest Israelis remain united in their support for the war in Gaza to destroy Hamas, but not in Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership.
And guess what? Netanyahu, unlike others in his government who were willing to apologize and take responsibility for what happened to those 3 hostages, he refused. It took him a while to even acknowledge it, speaking only hours after the army admitted to shooting 3 Israeli hostages as they held up a white flag in Gaza, fueling consternation and anger among Israelis. Netanyahu appeared to be trying to change the subject, boasting that he had prevented the creation of a Palestinian state in the past and would continue to do so. By the way, let's not forget how he prevented that from happening. He prevented that from happening by funding and propping up Hamas. He did that. Okay, so the terrorists who crossed into Israel and slaughtered those innocent civilians, they were individuals who were funded and empowered by the sitting prime minister of Israel. That is what happened. Let me just give you one quote from Netanyahu. I'm proud that I prevented the establishment of a Palestinian state because today everybody understands what the Palestinian state could have been. Now that we've seen the little Palestinian state in Gaza, everyone understands what would have happened if we had capitulated to international pressures and enabled a state like that on the West Bank. But remember, he is the one who propped up Hamas. I have the evidence in front of me right now. In March of 2019, he told his Likud party members the following: anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. And there are other politicians within Israel who spoke out against what Netanyahu was doing at the time. We can get to that as well if you'd like. But make no mistake, Hamas is a Netanyahu project, funded and propped up by Netanyahu himself.
So look at all the obvious hypocrisy if you just pierce the veil of propaganda. So America says, well, we can't. They have to keep bombing Gaza because they have to kill everyone in Hamas, and then we will have victory. Why? And how you can't have a peace deal, obviously, because how could you negotiate with evil? Hamas is so evil. The people who murdered 14 times as many civilians, not evil, by the way, but Hamas is super evil for the amount of people that they killed. So that's why we have no partner for peace and we can't have peace. Well, Netanyahu is bragging openly about how he doesn't want peace and doesn't want a two-state solution and has prevented it in the past and is going to continue to prevent it. So obviously, he's not a partner for peace. Do we get the same criticism of Netanyahu from the US government? Absolutely not. The beloved Netanyahu, and they crawl around his feet. So Biden pretends and his whole administration, oh, we're holding their feet to the fire. No, you're licking his feet. I'm sorry, it's a gross thing, but that's exactly what they're doing. So wait, who's giving who money here? This doesn't make any, so they say, we're gonna give you the 14 billion. Why do they need 14 billion more dollars? To murder more Palestinians? I think they're pretty good at murdering Palestinians. I don't think they need any extra. Does it look like they need extra money to kill more Palestinian civilians? Okay, so but Biden says, well, I'm being tough on them behind the scenes.
He's not.
And meanwhile, though, he says, send them the $14 billion with no limitations. Why no limitations? It's our money. Why can't we put any limits on it? No, who's the boss of who? Look, guys, I get it. There's old anti-Semitic tropes about how Jews control the world, etc. That's nonsense, it's not true, okay? But in this country, we have organized, legalized bribery. So lobbyists can simply buy any politician they like. And it's not just Israel, other countries do it, certainly industries do it, like the oil companies, the defense contractors, etc. But it is just not true to say that Israel does not have influence over US politicians. It's not within a million miles of true. They spend a tremendous amount of money in our politics. And so it's not surprising that our politicians say 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire. We don't give a damn about the voters. Where's the money? Where's the money? I will never question Israel. I will never question them. That's what Biden says. That's what John Fetterman says. That's what 90% of Congress says. Why do we're not allowed to question people committing 14 times as many war crimes as Hamas. We're not allowed to question the people we're sending $14 billion to. No, they should get $0 when their leader says, I don't want peace. All I want is murder and terrorism that is 10, 20 times worse than Hamas. So no, that is not an ally, that is not a democracy. And every day that another dollar from all of us goes to them is a day when America is complicit in those war crimes and complicit in killing those 9,000 Palestinian children.
Final thing I'll say is, CNN's reporting on this issue has been mixed, but they do have these bright spots where they do incredible reporting. And what I appreciate is when they draw attention to specific people and what they've experienced as a result of this ongoing war. And they profiled this one young Palestinian girl who suffered from 3 separate airstrikes. The first one wiped out her family. She lost both of her parents. Second airstrike, she lost her limbs, she lost her legs. Third airstrike, she lost her life. You have a population of people who are trapped in a small strip of land, waiting for the day they're gonna die. And that is the kind of life they're living because of Israel and because of our financial and military support to Israel. And I feel so much shame in knowing that I live in a country that has a government that allows this to happen. And even though I would change things if I could unilaterally, all I can do is ask for forgiveness from the international community. This is not representative of most Americans. This is not what most Americans want. Unfortunately, we have a government that is fully corrupted by one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the country. And as a result, they'll give us the middle finger as they continue to fund and provide bombs to a military that doesn't care about human life at all in the Gaza Strip, including the lives of their own citizens, Israeli hostages. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll show you some of the other actions that the IDF has been engaging in, including putting the names of Americans on bombs that they drop on the very civilians we're talking about. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and all these wonderful new members, Marilyn Folks, Gail Gordon, AJ Duenas, and Gary Bennell. We appreciate you guys so much. They hit the join button below. You can do likewise. And we need it. It's tough times in this industry, so every member matters, and we appreciate you. Anna.
Well, a lot more news to get to, including some more updates on Gaza. The same Israeli army that slaughtered 3 of its own people as they were pleading for help in Gaza have decided to write the names of American citizens who are critical of its practices on the very bombs that they drop on civilians in the Gaza Strip. So this was shared on X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you can't see the names clearly, I can tell you which names are included. You see the name of MMA fighter Jake Shields on there, scholar and YouTuber Mohammed Hijab, journalist and academic researcher Suleiman Ahmed, Dr. Anastasia Maria Lupus, and yes, you also see Cenk Uygur's name right there on the right-hand side at the very top. And Cenk, I mean, look, I'm curious how you feel seeing your name on. I mean, obviously the IDF has taken notice of your commentary, the fact that you have the audacity to be critical of their practices, critical of their slaughter, and yes, slaughter of thousands of children, little kids. You've been critical of that. They don't like it. So they write your name on the bomb that they're gonna drop. A bomb that's been supplied by our government, by the way, using US taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Going toward a country that's incredibly wealthy and can provide health care to every single one of its Israeli citizens, okay? Interesting how they feel entitled to that help as they write the names of American citizens on those bombs. Sorry, go ahead.
So, okay, so first of all, those bombs are going to murder Palestinian civilians. America should not be sending one more bomb to Israel. Their leader Netanyahu has openly said that he's proud that he prevented a Palestinian state and will keep doing so going forward. So he is not for peace, he is for endless war. He has committed more war crimes, about 20 times the war crimes that Hamas has. He is a terrorist thug who revels in murdering Palestinian civilians. And oh my God, have I hurt your feelings by pointing out things that are indisputably true? Well, good. I'm gonna tell the whole world all of your war crimes. And in the past, it was easy to muzzle American media. And all we would hear here in America, as the rest of the world heard reality, we would hear Israeli propaganda. Oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. That's why they had to kill 20 times the civilians that Hamas did. Hamas is terrible, awful terrorists for killing civilians. Well, we all agree. Israel, when they kill civilians, they're angels. Now they butcher 20 times the civilians. When it comes to kids, it's way worse. Israel has killed about 300 times the number of kids Hamas killed. Hamas killed 36 kids on October 7th. Our heart broke for them, for those kids. Now Israel has killed 9,000 kids. 9,000 kids with those bombs. And guys, if you're an American, you paid for that. And now Joe Biden is saying, let's give them 14 billion more. For what? Does it look like they don't have enough money to murder Palestinians? No, they've already murdered 19,000 Palestinians. There's a lot more to come. They say there's some Hamas fighters in there. They can't prove how many Hamas fighters, but everyone agrees, even the IDF says yes, the overwhelming majority of those are civilians. They're dropping gigantic unguided missiles into the middle of residential areas. Now, 90% of Gazans are homeless. Their houses have been destroyed. The whole place has been leveled by the terrorist Netanyahu. So you want to write my name on a bomb that you used to murder children? Well, it doesn't bother me, okay? I don't care about my name, I care about the bomb. 2/3 of Americans say ceasefire, for God's sake, stop murdering their children, stop it. But our politicians are so incredibly corrupt. They say, no, whatever Israel says, we will beg them to, how can we help you to murder more kids? How can I help you, Joe Biden says. Well, no, if me or my allies get in office, we will not help you murder more kids. And yes, it is terrorism when you murder 9,000 children. Don't tell me that you have the most incompetent army in the world. Oh, golly gee, we can't drop bombs right at all. We just happen to murder 20 times the people that Hamas did, and it was all an accident, and they were collateral damage. Well, no one believes you.
Let's talk about those bombs, just briefly. Let's talk about those bombs. Because the US government does provide the IDF all the weapons that they could possibly want, including precision-guided munitions. But according to a recent report by CNN, close to half of the bombs they're using are not precision-guided munitions. There are different types of bombs that actually end up causing more collateral damage, as they like to say. So let's take a look at CNN's report, and I'll fill you in on more.
The US intelligence community assesses that of the roughly 29,000 air-to-ground munitions that Israel has dropped on Gaza over the last 2+ months, about 40 to 45% of those munitions have been unguided, also known as dumb bombs. Now that stands in contrast, of course, to precision-guided munitions, which are sometimes laser-guided, GPS-guided, typically are more accurate and precise than unguided munitions, which experts told us really pose an elevated risk to civilians and can be less precise. And when you're talking about such a densely populated area like Gaza is, the difference between a target reaching, a munition reaching its target within a few feet can mean a matter of life and death in such a densely populated area.
So the US claims that it doesn't know why Israel is still choosing to use so-called dumb bombs when we're giving them precision-guided munitions. Now, you can speculate as to why they've chosen to use the dumb bombs that cause much more damage, kill far more civilians. And we've certainly talked about why we think that's the case. But I should also note that it's not conducive to keeping IDF soldiers alive when you're using so-called dumb bombs. In fact, at least 105 Israeli soldiers have died since the military began ground operations in Gaza. And that's according to an IDF spokesperson. But get a load of this, at least 20 of those deaths were caused by accidents, they say, accidents. Of those 20 deaths, 13 were caused by friendly fire or internal fire from the military's own troops. 6 were caused by other accidents related to weaponry, machinery, trampling, they said. At least 1 death was caused by firing irregularities. I love all the euphemisms used here. They're completely out of control. Okay, not only are they killing literally thousands of civilians in Gaza, they're also killing their own members of the military. They just gunned down 3 Israeli hostages over the weekend. Out of control. And they think it's a big gotcha. They think it's like a big to write someone's name or a bunch of names of Americans on those bombs. Americans who are sober enough, mentally sober enough to see the situation for what it really is. You guys are killing your own. Absolute incompetent fools and absolutely evil.
Yeah. So some presidents have had enemies lists, like Nixon famously had an enemies list. And we were covering George W. Bush's enemies list a long time ago on the show. And I was kidding around about how I'm mad I didn't make the list. Well, apparently I made a list here. And now it's a very, very dangerous list because American journalists who Israel doesn't like sometimes get murdered, like Shireen Abu Akleh. And now I've lost count of the number of journalists they've murdered in Gaza, but last I checked it was 68. So I think Hamas killed 3 reporters. Again, I'd have to double check those numbers. And Israel, as usual, said, oh, you think that's bad? We'll kill 20 times as much. And we don't want the news getting out, but we're a democracy. We're an ally of America. We're inflaming 1.6 billion Muslims and getting them to despise America for all the Muslim children that are being butchered with our money. But we're an ally. we're an ally. Oh, we keep 5 million Palestinian prisoners and murder them anytime we like, but we're a democracy. Are you? No, you're not. So you got me on an enemies list. I understand the danger involved in being on IDF's journalist enemies list, but I'm very proud of it. I would have been proud if the Germans had written my name on their bombs because they hated me so much. Good. During World War II. Yes, I said it. And as they murder 19,000 civilians, 9,000 children, if I'm at the top of their list of people that they hate for saying the truth about their war crimes, then I'm incredibly proud.
All right, let's take our second break a little early. When we come back, we have a segment on Trump and the rally that he had over the weekend in New Hampshire. He said some stuff that is concerning, to say the least. So we've got that and more coming up. Don't miss it.
Back on TRT, Cenk and Anna with you. Danielle Garofalo, thank you for upgrading your membership. That makes a giant difference to us too. You could do that through the join button too. Thank you, Anna.
Well, we switch gears. We move off the Gaza story to talk a little bit about Trump's latest terrible remarks. So let's get to it.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country. Nobody's even looking at them. They just come in. The crime is going to be tremendous.
Donald Trump said something Hitler-like yet again, leading to yet another news cycle filled with panicky denunciations of the former president. This time around, Trump declared that undocumented immigrants were, quote, poisoning the blood of the country. Now, I'll get to why it is being referred to as Hitler-like rhetoric in just a moment. But the poisoning the blood of our country language was not in Trump's prepared remarks distributed to media prior to Saturday's event, and it was not clear whether his use of that rhetoric was planned or adopted on the fly. Now, this was during a rally in New Hampshire. In chapter 11 of Mein Kampf, titled Nations and Race, Hitler wrote the following, quote, all great cultures of the past perished only because the originally creative race died out from blood poisoning. Now, Trump made comments similar to that during an interview, and I want to get to what he said to the National Pulse during this interview. He said, quote, nobody has any idea where these people are coming from, and we know they come from prisons. Do we? Do we know they come from prisons? I mean, it just totally makes things up. We know they come from mental institutions and insane asylums. We know they're terrorists. Nobody has ever seen anything like we're witnessing right now. It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country. It's so bad. And people coming in with disease, people are coming in with every possible thing you could have. Now, he had his defenders come out and of course provide cover for what he had to say here. Before we get to all of that, Cenk, your thoughts.
Okay, so it's a very specific phrase, guys. It's not like, hey, close the border. Well, everybody says that. That's a very common phrase. Immigrants are causing problems, rising crime. Those things are not true, but they're relatively common things that are said. No, poisoning the blood of our nation was only used by Adolf Hitler. And Ivana Trump, in a Vanity Fair profile, said, yes, Donald used to keep Hitler's speeches by his bedside. And that's, I mean, it's amazing because there's every kind of report that he never reads. But apparently the one thing he read was Hitler's speeches. According to his wife, it's in Vanity Fair, you can go check it out yourself, okay? So, and it's not in his prepared remarks. He's gratuitously adding that in. Now, why is this so dangerous? Number one, after Hitler said that, he said the Jews were poisoning the blood of our nation, and then he murdered them all. So a bit of a problem historically. And So now when Trump says these immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation, well, first of all, what's he saying? Our blood is pure, and when their blood, their DNA comes in, they're dirty, and they're poisoning our blood. And he says they're from South America, Latin America, now Asia and Africa. Asians that come to this country are poisoning our blood with their inferior blood? And so it has the most dangerous precedent you could imagine. It's a quote that's never been used outside of Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump. You pull that quote out of nowhere to do what? Well, partly to tell people, hey, don't say I didn't warn you. And he says that he's going to do forced, deportations of people once he gets in office. And look, everything he says is mental. Countries in Asia and Africa are taking people from their mental asylums and their prisons, and what they're doing there, what are they doing? They're flying them to Mexico and then walking them to the border and saying, go get them. You would have to be a raging lunatic to believe that. And by the way, after he said that, the crowd, not directly after, but in that same rally, the crowd chanted, "We love you, we love you."
Yeah, they do. And look, he is, to me, it is not surprising that he made these disgusting comments, specifically in New Hampshire, where Nikki Haley is closing in on him. She's still not close, but she's starting to see some pretty serious spikes in various states, and New Hampshire happens to be one of them. So he's dipping back into his greatest hits. And what's particularly scary about him making these types of comments in this moment is that public sentiment toward migrants has really gone in a negative direction. And it's because of how Biden and Congress has handled the migrant crisis. You have a migrant crisis that's now hitting, Democratic strongholds, these big blue cities like New York City, like Chicago, and people are frustrated. And what I'm terrified about is this kind of rhetoric, this kind of red meat resonates with people when they are feeling economically unstable and disadvantaged. So I'm terrified that this is going to resonate with a larger population of Americans at this current moment, given the incompetence of our current government in handling this situation appropriately.
So you're absolutely right. We have a recipe for disaster here. So this is exactly how fascists take over. So we have an economy where people feel like they're not making enough to keep up with inflation, and we've told you 100 different stories of how people have too much debt, the wages are too low, et cetera, and they feel like we're on the wrong track, and they don't know how to fix it, and they feel desperate and hopeless. And then along comes a demagogue, but just a demagogue and a hopeless population is not enough. You need to have a corrupt establishment that says, no, there's nothing wrong. No, everything is great. What do you mean? We should just do exactly what we've been doing so far, so that people can say, well, I know I need change in my life. So if the people in power are saying, let's just keep going the exact same direction, I'm definitely going to vote against that. No matter who the other guy is. I'm not even gonna pay attention to who the other guy is, but I'm not gonna vote for more of this, right? And 3/4 of the country thinks that we're on the wrong track. So these are all facts. And then the very last thing you need is a leader on the other side who is incredibly weak, and who's obsessed with himself. And I'm not just saying it about Joe Biden. Go back and read the history of the Weimar Republic. Read the history of every fascist takeover.
Read the book.
Corrupt system,
yeah, go ahead.
Hopeless population, an incredibly weak opposition leader who doesn't even bother running against and making a good case against the demagogue or trying to deliver for their people.
One of the books that I recently read is called Why Nations Fail. Read that book. I feel like it is foreshadowing in regard to the United States of America. But with that said, I want to get to the individuals who are providing cover for Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham happens to be one of them. Senator Lindsey Graham, of course, has been sucking up to Donald Trump ever since he got elected in 2016. And so listen to how this conversation went down, and then I'll decode some of it when we get back. Let's watch.
76% of the American people, not Donald Trump, believe the border is broken. They're worried about fentanyl coming over and killing their kids.
But what about his language, Senator?
Well,
just that language, that poisoning the blood.
You know, I'm worried about an outcome. He is right to want. He had the border secured, the lowest in 40 years in December of 2020. To the Biden administration, you're talking about Donald Trump's language as you sat on the sidelines and allowed the country to be invaded. 172 people on the terrorist watch list have come on your watch. Fentanyl is killing more Americans than any time in history.
Just on the language, though, I want to get your response. You have endorsed former President Trump. Are you comfortable with him using words like that?
You know, we're talking about language. I could care less what language people use as long as we get it right. I believe in legal immigration. I have no animosity toward people trying to come to our country. I have animosity against terrorists and against drug dealers.
Okay, let me just start with the least important point and get to the important point. Least important point, you're a United States Senator. It's I couldn't care less. This drives me nuts. Like, just take a second to think about what you're saying. I could care less means that you care, okay? Anyway, so that's the least important point. Important point to make is, look, I don't know what poll he was referencing there where he said 76% of Americans are upset about the immigration situation. I looked for that figure, I couldn't find that figure. But I did find a Pew Research poll from 4 days ago that is terrifying to me, considering what Americans are in fact frustrated about. And then you hear the rhetoric coming from the right wing and how that might resonate with them. So new Pew Research poll finds that 32%, only 32% of Americans are confident that Joe Biden can make good decisions on immigration. And even among Democratic voters, 85% of them used to be confident that Biden would make good decisions on immigration, but that number has dropped to 59%, specifically among Democratic voters, from 85% to 59%. So as much as I can't stand Lindsey Graham, and as much as I disagree with him in providing cover for the disgusting rhetoric coming from Donald Trump, unfortunately, some of what he said there is true. And it is a warning to the Democratic Party to wake up to the reality of the situation. But I don't think they will.
Well, that's the problem. We're constantly stuck between clowns to the left of us and jokers to the right of us. So these jokers on the right, now all of a sudden Lindsey Graham says, oh, language doesn't matter. I thought we just had giant congressional hearings because of a potential chant on college campuses. That's when everybody was pretending that language is the most important thing in the world. Now the Donald Trump, and by the way, they were saying that could be interpreted as genocide. Well, Trump is using Hitler quotes. So are we doing congressional hearings about that? No, now all of a sudden language doesn't matter. Even if it's a call for genocide, even if it's a Hitler quote. Now all of a sudden language doesn't matter. So how can you elect a Republican? Donald Trump says these Africans, these Asians, these Latinos poison our blood. They're inferior and we need to do something about them. So of course you can't vote for Donald Trump. He's a monster. And I don't know what other fascist things he's planning to do. I know he tried a coup here in America. Now that you go to the Democrats. Guys, no matter what you think should be done about immigration, we'll do it. Instead, Biden has done nothing, nothing. So now we have record undocumented immigrants, that's true, okay? Then the Republicans started sending them to the blue cities like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, etc. And then everybody's flipping out, don't send them here. No, that's not the right answer. No, they're here in America already. It doesn't matter if they're in a blue city or a red state. The question is, what should we do with them? And I have an idea. My idea is do a Marshall Plan for Latin America. Oh, no way, that worked before. Yeah, I know that worked before. I'm not doing it just out of morality. I'm doing it out of being practical. And it's much more efficient use of our money. But what's Biden's answer? Literally nothing. He's not getting tougher, he's not getting softer, he's not doing Marshall Plan, he's not doing this, he's doing nothing.
Let me jump in on that a little, and by the way, you're mostly correct, but I wanna make sure we're as accurate as we can be. He did do something that got very little attention. This was about 2 months ago. He realized, okay, there's a giant influx of Venezuelans coming here seeking asylum. So he finally lifted some of the economic sanctions against Venezuela. Now, part of that was to increase the oil supply internationally, because Venezuela, of course, is an oil producing country, and he wanted to lower the prices at the gas pumps. That's
ding, ding, ding,
that's
ding, ding,
I think
ding.
the main reason. But lifting those economic sanctions on Venezuela hopefully will improve economic conditions on the ground in Venezuela, thus leading to a situation in which people wouldn't want to leave the country to come here to the United States. So to your point, you're absolutely right. More of that should happen, but I don't think it will.
No, of course not. Because Biden is so scared like that if he actually did something proactive and try to help those countries where the majority of the immigrants are coming from, that the right wing would say, oh, you're too soft. Well, I don't give a damn what the right wing calls me or you or Biden or anyone else. I want to actually fix the problem. But Joe Biden doesn't view it that way. And to be fair to him, most politicians are like this. They're like, yeah, but how about me? The most important person is me. And I don't want to be called anything by the Republicans. I'm so scared of them. Then why are you running against them? For God's sake, retire, brother, retire. So, okay, so you did one halfway decent thing of removing the sanctions, and thank you, Anna, for pointing that out. That's something. And by the way, he mainly followed Trump's policies for most of the time.
He did.
That he was in office, and he's the kids in cages, and Trump's a monster and terrible. And for about 3/4 of his term, he followed identical policies to Trump, or near identical policies to Trump. So he's just a big fat zero sitting there because he doesn't care to do anything. He doesn't care to solve anything. He's only obsessed with himself and his legacy and his reputation. So he's like, how is this affecting my brother? All right,
it's affecting your reputation and your legacy in a negative way. If that's really the question that he's asking, right? So, look, final thing I'll say about this is, it's easy to point to Donald Trump's rhetoric and find it monstrous and to condemn it. But at the same time, remember, our current government, which is led by Democrats, which is led by Joe Biden, is supplying an endless supply of weaponry and bombs to the Israeli military, which has absolutely no problem slaughtering innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip. So on one hand, you have disgusting rhetoric. On the other hand, you have a government that has enabled the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip. So it's really difficult for me to see this situation as black and white, good versus bad, good versus evil. When in reality, on both sides, we have individuals with blood on their hands, period.
Yeah, and for my idea of doing Marshall Plan for El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, etc., they say, oh, well, that'll cost a lot of money. It might cost like $14 billion. The $14 billion we're planning to send to Israel to kill more Palestinian children. Yeah, that's the easiest decision in the world. Unfortunately, in Washington, it's just as easy, but in the reverse direction. Both Republicans and Democrats are saying, send the money, who cares about Palestinian children? But if it comes to actually helping our immigration issue and helping those countries at the same time, no way. We would never be generous, we would never be magnanimous, and we would never help those poor people. Instead, we'll send them money for more war and more death and destruction.
One more Trump-related story before we take our break. Let's talk a little bit about what else Trump had to say that didn't really get much media attention at all.
He's a star, but a lot of times people say, well, this is going to be easy for him, and then they forget to vote. They don't go out to vote. You got to get out and vote, but you got to help him financially because you're all people that have a lot of money. I know 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. So anything you are going to do, it quadruple it. It doesn't mean it's just, I hope you can back him and write checks for him and do everything. And then we're going to close the border. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay off our debt.
While the media has effortlessly covered Trump's recent disgusting and unhinged comments about undocumented immigrants poisoning the blood of our country, fascinating that they haven't really done much coverage of what you just saw. Because over the same weekend, Donald Trump promised wealthy individuals at a wealthy fundraiser that should he get reelected for a second term, he will in fact further cut taxes for the rich. Interesting how that didn't get any attention at all. And honestly, there's good reason to believe that if he does get elected again, he will in fact cut taxes on the rich, because that is one of the few things he did accomplish in his first term. Now, there's very little information available at the moment in regard to the event that Trump was speaking at. Here's what we do know though. The video that we showed you was posted on a Facebook page on December 12th by a user named Robert Ward. Based on Trump's comments, the event appeared to be a fundraiser for North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who is in fact running for governor. Now, Trump praised Robinson and asked the audience to contribute to his race. Robinson also gave a speech at the event. Now, National Review reporter Audrey Fahlberg obtained an invitation for the event, and everyone there was probably very wealthy. Just to attend, you'd have to pay $1,000 just to be a guest, to be a sponsor, $6,400 to be a host committee member, I guess, $12,800. And Trump isn't just making those promises at fancy private events. This weekend, he also held a rally in New Hampshire. Let's take a look at what he had to say there.
Here is my pledge to every New Hampshire family. I will never let the Trump tax cuts, and they are the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country, I will never let them be taken away from you. And with your vote in this election, we will cut your taxes even further. That's what built our economy.
Now, you see all these people behind him cheering because they think that they're gonna benefit from tax cuts, but the 2017 tax cuts overwhelmingly benefited top earners and corporations. There have been multiple analyses done on this, and I'll share some of the details with you in just a moment. But first, Cenk, thoughts on the media's silence on the tax issue?
Yeah, well, that's so. Look, in his first term, there was a lot of establishment people like Gary Cohn, who was at Goldman Sachs, came over to Treasury and helped Donald Trump cut taxes for the rich and corporate taxes, and they cut it from 35% to 21%. It was the biggest corporate tax cut in American history. So the reason the Gary Cohns of the world and this Steve Mnuchin, obviously the Treasury Secretary, and then Gary Cohn was the top economic policy advisor for Trump. The reason they were all there was because they're like, oh, this is great. This guy has no brakes in the car. We can cut taxes so much, brutalize the average American, and do giant class warfare and move all the money up to the rich and to corporations. And they did it. That was the one thing that he passed that was historic and had a massive impact. He barely built any wall, but he did that. This time around, he has one specific policy issue that he has pitched, and that is cutting corporate taxes to 15%.
It's insane.
Okay, so eventually he's gonna cut them to zero or maybe negative numbers. So we have to all take money out and give it to corporations, which by the way, already happens. That's called subsidies, right? And he's never attacked the subsidies. They're like, the oil companies are swimming in money, and we give them $20 billion every single year.
Corporate welfare.
From our money. Why? What happened to America first? What happened to looking out for the average American? What happened to populists? No, behind closed doors, they always tell you what they actually think because they're talking to their best friends, the donors. When Biden did it in 2020, he said nothing will fundamentally change. And that was the most true thing that Biden has ever said. His main goal was status quo. I don't want to change anything. I love the way that the people at the top should stay at the top. And he was telling people that were at the top and they loved it. And they funded his campaign tremendously. Now Trump is talking behind closed doors to incredibly rich donors and he's telling them, don't worry, you give us money, we give you tax cuts. How's this not just organized bribery? And what happened to draining the swamp? But yet, to Anna's point, almost no press coverage. Why? Because corporate media loves corporate tax cuts. Remember, literally all those companies, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, etc., are part of giant multi-billion-dollar corporations. And if Trump wins, their tax rate goes down from 21 to 15. So you think the executives that hire people at those companies are gonna be like, no, go attack Trump for trying to lower our taxes? No way. They love that part. So that's the real Donald Trump, that's the real corporate media, and that's how we all get screwed.
So I just wanted to give you guys what I promised. We've talked about this issue so many times, but just as a refresher, the 2017 tax cuts overwhelmingly benefited the rich. The working class did not benefit to the same extent, not even close. So the centerpiece of that 2017 tax law was a deep, permanent cut in the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. The Tax Policy Center estimates that over a third of the benefits from corporate rate cuts flows to the top 1% of households. Read Why Nations Fail. This is contributing to the growing inequality in the country, and that growing inequality will lead to the fall of this country, I have no doubt. Now, a careful new study from researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, the Federal Reserve Board, and the Joint Committee on Taxation finds that none of the earnings gains from the 2017 corporate rate cuts occurred to the bottom 90% of the income distribution, and this group received just a small fraction of the overall economic gains. In fact, when it comes to non-corporations, when it comes to individual earners, well, it turns out that only high income earners got a massive tax cut thanks to this 2017 tax bill. The law cut the top individual income tax rate from 39.6% to 37% for married couples with over $600,000 in taxable income. By itself, this provided a couple with $2 million in taxable income a $36,400 tax cut.
Because they really needed that, but you didn't need that money at all. Like if you have student debt and they're like, oh, what are we supposed to cut like tens of thousands of dollars of your student debt? No way, we don't have the money for that. But if you're making $2 million a year, oh, here, take another $36,400. That we have plenty of money for that. He ran on Drain the Swamp, guys. And all he did was deliver for the rich and screw you over more. And it's all of these corporate donations, these donations were super wealthy, et cetera. It's just a way to buy votes, okay? You give me money, you bribe me through campaign contributions, and then I give you giant tax breaks. I mean, those guys that made $36,400, giving $3,300 to Trump, to this guy, et cetera, it's a bargain. You're gonna have plenty of money left over because of the laws that they pass on your behalf. Meanwhile, who's fighting for the average American? No one. So last thing, Biden said, oh, he brought it down to 21, from 35 to 21. When I get back in, I'm gonna bring it back up to 28. It was at 35. What do you mean bring it back up to 28? And then Joe Manchin said, no, I won't go $1 above 25. And then Biden was like, okay, fine, 25%. And then did they actually do that? Nope, Biden didn't do anything. Didn't do anything. So it's now still at 21%. And he's going, oh golly gee, I couldn't get that one through. So all my rich donors are super happy about it. Oops, I guess I just couldn't get past the filibuster, wink. These guys all do the same goddamn thing, rob us blind every time.
When we come back for the second hour of the show, I'm gonna talk about Clarence Thomas whining about how in today's dollars, $300,000 a year in salary is just not enough. It leads to financial problems. That and more coming up, don't miss it.